An old farmer gives one of his workers an injured bull, saying it's useless. But when he finds out the true value of the animal, Patrick was the kind of man who passed unnoticed to the hasty eyes, but left deep marks on those who stopped to truly observe him. His speech was low, almost whispered, but carried the serene firmness of one who had chosen peace as his path. His gaze, always slightly downcast, bore signs of the accumulated weariness of the years, but within him was something that could not be extinguished. A subtle, yet constant glow, the kind of light that comes from true goodness, from kindness that insists on surviving even in harsh times. He had worked on that farm for so long that he no longer knew if he had started in his youth or childhood, but still, he didn't own a single inch of land. He treated the place as if it were an extension of his own soul, tending to the soil, the animals, the fences, and the daily routine with the care of someone preserving a heritage. Every day, even before the sky brightened, he would silently walk the same dirt path, his steps slow and steady, hands marked by hard labor, feet accustomed to the dry ground. By the end of the day, he would return to his modest home, where his wife awaited him with a simple dinner, and their 2 young children, still immersed in the lightness of childhood, would run to embrace him. He didn't own a car, jewelry, bank accounts full of money, or any possessions that drew attention, but he carried within him something rarer, a constant, living, almost stubborn gratitude that made him see beauty in even the smallest things. He never refused to lend a hand, even when his own was empty. He helped neighbors without asking for anything, shared what little he had with those who had even less, and did so naturally, as if it were the only way to exist. His face, sunburned from the field, hid tears he would never let fall in front of his children, and his thin body, which seemed fragile at first glance, housed a resistance built from years of silent struggle, accumulated love, and faith in things many had already forgotten. On that hot, late afternoon, Patrick, with his boots covered in dry mud and his shoulders hunched from the accumulated fatigue of another full day under the sun, walked slowly toward the small faucet by the shed, where he usually washed his hands before heading home. Sweat clung to his shirt, and his back ached as though every muscle was begging for rest. He was already thinking of his children waiting for him, the smell of his wife's cooking, the good silence of home. It was then that he heard the hoarse and direct voice of one of the foremen calling his name. "Patrick, Don Anthony wants to speak to you at the main corral," the man shouted, not even getting closer before turning his back and disappearing into the shadows of the shed. Patrick didn't say anything. He simply nodded with a barely perceptible gesture and continued his path in silence. It was unusual to be called by Don Anthony. In fact, in all the years he had worked on that land, he could count on one hand the number of times the boss had said more than a good morning or a cold order. That alone was strange. When he arrived at the main corral, he saw Don Anthony standing with his arms crossed over his chest, his hat pushed low on his forehead, and an impatient expression. He was standing by an old fence, his gaze fixed on something on the dirt floor. The silence between them lasted a few seconds, until the farmer pointed with his chin toward the inside of the corral. "Do you see that?" Don Anthony said, without looking directly at Patrick, his voice dry like the leaves scattered on the ground. Patrick looked. It was a bull, large, dark coat, and imposing at first glance, but it soon became clear that something was wrong. Its left front leg seemed twisted, swollen. The animal was breathing irregularly, panting. Its eyes were half closed, betraying pain. It was lying down with no sign of energy. "He hurt his leg a few days ago," Don Anthony continued. "Since then, he's been nothing but a burden. Doesn't eat properly, can't get up, takes up space. And to top it off, he needs food that he doesn't repay with work. A waste, to be honest." Patrick remained silent, watching the animal closely. He felt a tightness in his chest, not from pity, but from something deeper, almost instinctive, like seeing the pain of someone who had been discarded for no longer serving others' purposes. "As far as I'm concerned, this one's done," Don Anthony said with a crooked smile without warmth. But I thought maybe, for someone like you who lives with little and sees value even in what he doesn't have, it might be good for something. Patrick looked at his boss, then at the bull, then back at the ground. He immediately understood that this wasn't a gift. It was a discard, wrapped in a false gesture of generosity. There was no recognition there, only disdain disguised as charity. "It's yours, if you want it," Don Anthony concluded. "If not, I'll have someone get rid of it. I can't stand seeing an animal dragging itself around like that." The silence stretched on for a few more seconds. Patrick didn't respond right away. He took a deep breath. He could taste the dust in his mouth, the ache in his shoulders, the knot in his throat. "Thank you, sir," he finally said, his voice firm but without pride. "I'll take it." Don Anthony simply turned his back, already satisfied with his little performance, and disappeared into the barns without saying another word. Patrick approached the bull cautiously, kneeling beside the animal. He observed the wounded leg closely, the sweat running down its thick skin, the almost lifeless eyes. He gently placed his hand on the animal's neck and felt the weak warmth of its body. "We're going to fix you up," he murmured, as though speaking to an old friend. With great effort, he found an old cart he used to carry firewood, improvised a system of ropes with leather strips, and enlisted the help of a farm boy to carefully load the animal onto the cart. It took almost 2 hours of pauses and slow maneuvers until he finally managed to get it to the back of his house, where there was a slightly flatter patch of land. His wife watched from the door, her face filled with concern. The children ran to the cart, their eyes wide with curiosity. "What kind of animal is this, Dad?" the youngest asked, trying to climb onto the cart's wheel to see better. "A friend who needs help," Patrick replied, tiredly smiling. "Is he sick?" the older one asked, furrowing his brow. "Just hurt," Patrick corrected, "but with time he'll get better." His wife said nothing. She simply nodded slowly. She knew her husband better than anyone. She knew he didn't make decisions impulsively. If he brought that animal home, it was because he felt he should, and that was enough. That very night, while the children slept, Patrick built a small makeshift shelter using old boards and pieces of wire mesh. He covered the floor with straw and brought buckets of fresh water. He fed the bull with what he had, some leftover corn, green leaves he had gathered from the yard. With each movement he spoke softly, as if conversing with a wounded friend. "You won't die here. Here, you'll get care. Here, you'll get patience." In the following days, he woke up even earlier. He washed the wounds with warm water, applied poultices made of herbs and clay. He wrapped the leg with cloth and massaged the injured area with oil, always in silence, with the calm of someone who knows healing takes time. The children started coming closer, bringing leaves, watching every gesture their father made with care. "Is he going to get better, Dad?" the youngest asked, resting his chin on the makeshift fence. "He will, son," Patrick replied. "Anything that's cared for with love gets better." But despite all his dedication and trust, the bull wasn't getting better. Patrick kept trying. He cleaned the wounds, changed the straw in the shelter, offered food by hand, and spoke to the animal as if his words could keep it on its feet. But the bull barely responded. It trembled at the slightest effort. Its eyes were dull, its breathing heavy. Sometimes it wouldn't even open its eyes when Patrick was near. It was as if, little by little, the body had begun to give up. Inside the house, the tension was silent but present. His wife cooked in silence more than usual. The children looked less at the shelter and more at the floor. At dinner, while they ate, the two boys whispered to each other. "Do you think he's going to die, Mom?" the older one whispered, looking worried. "Shh, eat, son," his mother replied, avoiding looking at her husband. Patrick heard. He heard everything, but he said nothing. He simply stared at his plate, his mind elsewhere. The silence weighed more than any words. Later, When the house was dark and the children were sleeping, he sat at the kitchen table, his face weary, his fingers tapping slowly on the wooden surface. His wife appeared in the doorway. "Won't you sleep?" she asked, approaching. "I can't," Patrick replied. "I keep thinking about him out there, alone, suffering." She sat across from him, saying nothing. "I was saving that money to buy a few things for the house," he said softly. "Or for an emergency, but I guess this is the emergency, isn't it?" "Do you want to call the vet?" she asked. "I do. I can't accept him dying like this, like he's just a mistake, like he's just a burden," he replied, finally looking at her. "If there's a chance, he deserves it, and if not, at least I'll know I tried everything." She took a deep breath and nodded. "Then call him. We'll figure it out later." The next morning, Patrick walked to a friend's house and got in touch with an experienced vet named Thomas, an older man with a slow manner of speaking, known for taking care of large herds and understanding animals better than people. Patrick waited all day for the visit. When the vet finally arrived, it was almost late afternoon. He stepped out of his truck with a worn hat and a leather bag in hand. "You're Patrick?" he asked, squinting in the sun. "Yes, thank you for coming," Patrick replied, guiding him to the shelter. Thomas entered slowly, observing everything around him with calm. He stopped in front of the bull, who was still lying down, immobile, breathing with difficulty. "How long has he been like this?" Thomas asked, kneeling beside the animal. "A few days. I tried to care for him as best I could, but he just keeps getting worse," Patrick said, tense. The vet opened his bag, put on gloves, and began examining the bull. He checked its temperature, pulled the eyelid back, gently touched the injured leg. He stood there for several minutes in silence, analyzing the animal's body with precision. Patrick's wife watched from a distance, concerned. The children were quiet, standing at the door, peering without the courage to come closer. When the exam was finished, Thomas stood up slowly. He wiped his hands on a cloth and looked at Patrick with a different expression, as though he had found hidden treasure in the mud. "Do you know what you have here?" he asked. "A sick bull," Patrick replied, confused. "No, this is a breeding bull of rare lineage. Pure blood, fine genetic structure used in special crossbreeding. See the shape of the forehead, the curve of the back. This animal isn't ordinary, not here nor anywhere." Patrick blinked a few times, trying to understand. "Still, he's in this condition. He is. But with the right treatment, proper feeding, he can recover, and more. If he recovers, this animal is worth a lot. Not just in money, but in production. A bull like this could bring fortune to a farm. He just needs patience, lots of it." Patrick stood still, without reacting. His silence said everything. "If I were you," Thomas continued, "I wouldn't sell him for any offer. Take good care of him. The real value isn't in selling him now. It's in what he can bring in the long run." "I don't even know what to say," murmured Patrick, running his hand over his face. "I thought I was just trying to save an animal so he wouldn't die alone." "Well," the vet said, grabbing his bag, "you saved much more than that." Patrick walked him to the door, still in disbelief. "How much do I owe you?" he asked. "Nothing. From the way you care for him, this bull's in good hands. Just promise me you'll do what I said." "I promise," Patrick replied, his voice choked. Once the vet left, his wife approached. "What did he say?" "He said this bull isn't just any bull, that he's worth a lot, that he could change our lives," he answered, still staring at the horizon. That night, they sat at the table as usual, but there was a different silence, not one of worry, but of something new, hope. The next day, as Patrick fed the bull with more care than ever, he heard the sound of hurried footsteps outside. One of the farm boys appeared at the gate, out of breath. "Don Anthony sent for you." Patrick slowly wiped his hands and adjusted his hat. "Why?" he asked. "No, he just said to come," and quickly. On the way to the farm, Patrick's heart tightened. Something was wrong. When he arrived, Don Anthony was standing on the porch, arms crossed, with a closed expression. "You took one of my bulls and took him home, Patrick?" he asked sharply. "It was you who gave him to me, remember? You said he was no good anymore," Patrick replied, trying to stay calm. "I said it might be useful to you. I didn't say it was yours. And now they're saying that bull is worth more than all my cattle combined? I just took care of him. I didn't know what he was. It doesn't matter. That animal is mine. You took something that doesn't belong to you. That's theft," Don Anthony said, his voice growing louder. "Isn't there anyone who heard you give him to me? No signed papers?" Don Anthony continued, looking around as if feeding off the power of silence. Patrick felt a knot in his throat. He knew he couldn't prove it. What had been a despicable gesture now became a trap. "Either you return the bull, or I'll call the police," Don Anthony threatened. Patrick lowered his gaze, unable to respond. It was as if everything he had built in the past days had been torn away in a single blow. He left the farm with a hot face, not from the sun, but from shame and helplessness. He walked home in silence. As he approached the yard, the sound of children's laughter still filled the air. The children were playing near the shelter, unaware of what was to come. His wife, sitting on the doorstep, looked up as soon as she saw him. "He's going to take the bull," Patrick said plainly, stopping in front of her. "He said he never gave him to me. Said it was a misunderstanding. I tried. But there's no way to prove anything." The boys ran to him, excited, but stopped when they saw their father's expression. The oldest frowned. "Take the bull, Dad." "Why?" "Because now he wants him. Because he found out how much the bull is worth," he replied, speaking softly. "And I don't have papers, not witnesses, just my word, and to him that's worth nothing." His wife closed her eyes for a moment and nodded with regret. "Is it happening now?" He said he'd send for him today. It didn't even take half an hour. The sound of the truck's engine approaching silenced everything. The vehicle stopped outside, and two men got out. One of them walked straight to Patrick. "Boss sent us. We're here to take the bull," he said flatly. Patrick didn't answer. He simply walked to the shelter, opened the gate slowly, and ran his hand across the animal's forehead, just like he did every day. The bull raised its eyes, not understanding. "Sorry, my friend," he murmured. "I tried." The men used the winch to lift the bull onto the truck bed carefully, and in a few minutes the truck was gone, leaving behind a trail of dust and a dry silence in the yard. Patrick stood still, looking at the empty space in the makeshift enclosure. He didn't cry. He just breathed deeply and slowly entered the house, where his family was waiting silently, with the same emptiness on their faces. The following days were strange. The absence of the bull in the backyard felt larger than the space it had occupied. The empty enclosure bothered Patrick more than the silence itself. Every morning he would look at it, as if expecting to see the animal's head raised, its eyes alert. But the shelter remained empty, and dust covered the ground as if life had never been there. The routine returned to what it had been before, working the fields, tools, dealing with the other animals on the farm. But something inside Patrick had changed. He did what he had always done, but not in the same way. There was a quiet bitterness in his movements. The injustice still weighed on his chest, even though there were no shouts. Meanwhile, on the other side of the farm, Don Anthony kept the bull hidden from the others. The animal was taken to an isolated pen with restricted access. He wanted to avoid questions, comments, curious looks. This was his plan now, to prepare the bull to yield as much as possible. He was sure he had found a living goldmine. "Treat this animal like a priority," Don Anthony ordered his foreman. "Don't let anyone get too close. This bull is worth more than everything we have here." But his care was superficial. What mattered to him was the quick profit, the immediate return. He started planning crossbreeding too soon, trying to rush processes that required patience. He forced the bull into activities that demanded strength, even when the animal had not fully recovered. "It's dragging itself, Don Anthony," one of the handlers said hesitantly. "It's trembling. It's not eating right." "You think I asked for your opinion?" Don Anthony snapped. "Do what I told you. This animal needs to start yielding." The bull, pushed beyond its limits, began to wither. The fever came first. Then it stopped eating. Soon, it could barely stand. Within days, it was weaker than when Patrick had first found it. Desperate, Don Anthony called another vet. The man arrived in a hurry, but after examining the animal, he shook his head gravely. "It's in collapse. It's in multiple organ failure. Too much stress, wrong feeding, premature effort. I don't know if we can save it." "You have to save this animal," Don Anthony shouted, almost beside himself. "Do you know how much it's worth? If you knew how much it needed rest and care, you wouldn't be in this situation," the vet replied flatly. With the bull on the brink of death, Don Anthony tried to sell it quickly. But as soon as he made the first calls, he realized something had changed. The story of what had happened, the way he took the animal from Patrick, the threats, the greed, had already spread. "Look, Anthony, I heard the story," one of the buyers responded. "Nobody here wants to get involved with that, not after what you did." "We work on trust, Don Anthony," another said, "and yours, unfortunately, is in the past." His name, once strong among the big and small, was now synonymous with dishonor. Small breeders were outraged, spreading the story at fairs, gatherings, and conversations. Suppliers started turning down contracts. Partners distanced themselves. Don Anthony's image, already aging, crumbled before his very eyes. Meanwhile, Patrick continued his life, or at least tried to. He returned from work, had dinner with his family, helped the children with their homework. But his gaze still went to the empty spot in the yard every afternoon. It was on one of those afternoons that someone knocked at the door. His wife answered. It was a well-dressed man with a municipal badge hanging from his neck and a folder under his arm. "Good afternoon. Are you Patrick's wife?" "I am. Is something wrong?" "No. I'm here to talk to you about the bull," he replied, entering carefully, as if knowing he was stepping on delicate ground. "Your story reached us, and also a workers' rights association." Soon, Patrick appeared at the door, surprised. "I'm the one who cared for the bull, but he's not mine anymore," Patrick said before any explanation. "What's fair doesn't always happen at the right time, Mr. Patrick, but it does happen. The association is following the case, and we've secured legal support based on testimonies, reports, and public pressure." Patrick stayed silent, trying to understand where this was going. "The vet who came here, Thomas, is outraged by what happened. He himself offered to mediate the bull's recovery if he can still be saved, but with one condition, that he returns to you, to the one who truly cared for him." Patrick's wife, standing beside him, put her hand to her mouth, emotional. "Is this really happening?" Patrick asked. "Are they going to return him?" "Not just return him. Don Anthony will sign the papers, formally, with acknowledgement of ownership." Days later, what seemed impossible happened. Don Anthony, pressured from all sides, legally cornered and with no support left, returned the bull. "Here it is," he said, signing the documents in front of a small group. "Do what you want." Patrick didn't reply. He simply took the papers with steady hands and put them in his pocket. For the first time, the animal was truly his. With technical support and proper guidance, he began the treatment again. The bull was still weak, but alive, and this time everything was done as it should be. Proper feeding, rest, constant monitoring. No rush, with patience the bull recovered. It began to walk with strength. The gleam in its eyes returned. Its body gained weight. Its presence in the yard filled the space left empty. Over time, small breeders started seeking out Patrick. They wanted breeding, they wanted genetics, but they also wanted to work with someone trustworthy. "You don't have to pay now," Patrick would say. "We'll make it fair. No rush." The income came slowly, and with it, the changes. The land was expanded, the roof repaired, the house painted. The children began attending a better school. His wife started a small business selling homemade crafts and food. And the bull, it grazed there, proud, walking among the children's feet, like a silent guardian of everything that had been earned. Don Anthony, on the other hand, saw his farm empty out. One by one, he lost contracts, partners, credibility. He tried to resist, but no one wanted to work with him anymore. He had land, but no one to tend to it. Titles, but no moral value. Memories, but no honor. He slowly faded into oblivion, forgotten by the same people who once surrounded him. His punishment came without a judge. He fell into obscurity. Patrick, meanwhile, continued with the same gentle speech, calloused hands, the same quiet way of walking. But now, wherever he went, he was greeted with respect. Strong gazes followed him, because everyone knew he didn't win by shouting, nor by buying, nor by threatening. He won with dignity. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, give it a like, and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. See you in the next story.